right, Kev, highest mileage vehicle you got in your fleet?
Ooh, well, I got 3 at 160. I got another one at a $120. So, you know, I gotta get attached to them. And as long as they're running good, you know, I don't want to let them go.
Yeah, man, that's what happens. We normally get a really good, reliable vehicle, get a lot of miles on it, but your confidence gets shaken if it breaks down once or twice.
Yeah.
It could be little things, serpentine belts, vacuum hoses like this little dry rot you see here.
Yeah, well, it's easy if you follow the maintenance schedule from your manufacturer. You know, for that first 100, 150K, you're doing your shocks when you're supposed to, your brakes when you're supposed to, maybe you're flushing your fluids. But when you start getting 150, 180, 200 plus, you know, 1,000 miles on them, then you start getting a lot of these small little things, like you said, like just that little vacuum line that you're not really paying attention to. It's not on your maintenance schedule. Well, that guy could just fail on you while you're going down the road. So what you want to do is make sure while you're doing those big maintenance items, the obvious ones, you start eyeballing all the little details. You know, and occasionally you can decide that, like that radiator, it didn't go bad, but do I want to be stuck on a road trip with my family going to, you know, a theme park?
Yeah.
Stuck on the side of the road? So you can decide when you've got an attachment to a vehicle, you don't want to get into another car payment, to go ahead and, you know, hit some of the other things on there, and then boom, you're good for another 50 or 75,000 miles or whatever it is for that particular area. Now with the big help from Federated Auto Parts, we're going to knock a lot of those question marks right off the page. But once this intake is off, we can look down in the valley, we can look for hoses and things that are dry rotted or cracked.
And right out of the gate, man, we took that intake off. You see this Pcv valve hose right here, right? And this thing, look, already finding some cracks in it.
Yeah.
You know, it was sitting there underneath both sides. You know, it's supposed to be pretty pliable, but I could snap this thing just like that.
Yeah, so we'll have to add that to the list, and you know, some small things while we're in there.
And you can see just from heat and so forth and lines how dry rotted this is. Now this is a good point. When we pull the intake off, you want to clean that up. All right, this is the intake plan of the runners. So have some masking tape around and just cover these guys up so a lot of this debris in particular doesn't fall down into the motor.
Nut, bolt, and screw too, you know?
That's the worst.
Well, we're going to do some preventative maintenance here, and one of the items is a VVT, or variable valve timing solenoid valve. So you've got, in this case, we've got our cams on top of the engine, and up front we've got cam phasers. So that cam phaser can rotate the cam forward or backwards relative to the crank, so we can pick up power, fuel economy, especially emissions when you got to get your emissions testing. But what happens is you've got a control valve right here. This is a spool valve, and I'll pull this guy off. That's controlling that position, and these guys eventually can get clogged with small amounts of debris because they're a very precise little valve. And you can see this one, super easy to get to, and simple to replace. So we've got a replacement. Ours is from Dorman, and what's nice is 3 bolts and a connector. This guy is off. It comes with a new gasket over here, and I'll show you how this thing works. Pretty neat little device. There we go. So if you look in here, it's just a series of holes, but if we flip it over, now we've got basically a shuttle valve in here, and it's going to open up different circuits to allow oil to go from one location to the other. And what that does, if we look at the actual mechanism up here, on the front of that camshaft, we've got this phaser, and we can pump oil on one side of a vein and drive it this direction. We can pump oil on the other side of the vein and pump it that direction, and that's going to give us our timing changes. So real easy with a couple of bolts to make sure we're safe. We've got all ourselves covered for performance, fuel economy, and everything else.
All right, now we're attacking this fuel rail here, and understand, it's got a lot of high pressure fuel sitting right in here. You take the little clip off, and these pop right out with a little O-ring right here. Now, when you do this, when you're gonna attack fuel rails and replace something like injectors, a great thing to do is make sure you clean out all this road grime and debris you're gonna get laying down here in the intake. Whether you use a wet vac and just suck it out, you definitely wanna address down here. You'll have everything from leaves, road grime, dirt, and so forth before you pull these injectors out and put your new ones in. Now let's take a look at these injectors. It's an electronically controlled valve in here. And what happens is a lot of times you get debris, particulates in these little tiny orifices right in here. Now the job of this thing, right, is when it gets that signal, it's gonna spray a fine mist of fuel, like that. And what happens when it gets clogged up, you'll drip and it pulls up and so forth. You get a rough idle, you don't get that sweet little seg into that fine mist of fuel and air. So And our friends at Federated hooked us up with a bunch of SMP injectors. So I'll pop all these off, get our new ones in here, and this thing will be running fine.
One area that's real easy maintenance, but also very important, is the Serpentine Belt. What's nice is, it's a piece of cake to do. The one thing you want to make sure is you've sort of drawn out, at least mentally, really good, or maybe on a piece of paper, take a photo of that routing. There's a lot of little circles in there, and you can get confused on how that belt went. Now, in the old days, maybe you'd get 40, 50,000 miles out of a belt, and you could look for cracks and things like that, and it was bad. But with the EPDM construction, these things last a whole lot longer, which is great. 85,000 miles is where they start to kind of taper off. So you can't look at them anymore for cracks. You can get a little cheap tool and you can measure the groove depths. To get the friction to drive all these components, it's not two flat surfaces. It's those grooves create a lot of friction area to get everything to drive properly. And the other thing too is once they wear out, you can a lot of times get some squealing because there's an aramid fiber layer. Now that layer is what's going to keep the noise down so it's not squealing on you. So make sure you pick up like a good US made like Dayco belt. And even the designs in here that you don't even notice is the shapes of these profiles really help to go in there and grip and get the thing driving but not get the squealing. So a lot of these newer belts are actually improving some of the squealing noises from earlier Serpentine belt designs that weren't so good. Now you want to make sure also you replace your tensioner and your idler because these things have been spinning around for 180,000 miles. And this guy's not just hanging around with a spring on it. You've got crank torsional, so every time that cylinder fires, you're pulling the belt, releasing it. Every time that AC compressor is pumping. So you got a lot of action going on with that tensioner. So a couple of bolts, a little routing, easy maintenance. Hey, welcome back. We've got a 2006 Pathfinder, but 180,000 miles. So we're doing a lot of maintenance, but while we're here, we're also noticing things that we've got to fix while we're at it. So we got our new radiator in here from Denso. So this whole front cooling pack is going to be nice and solid, give us lots of confidence. And while we're in here, replacing hoses, we noticed a nice little CSI, sort of investigative.
Ooh.
Yeah, look at that.
Imagine you're just driving along, your car runs great, so you think. But underneath some hoses, underneath some brackets, there's things like this going on. And this is just all oxidation. You ever wonder what oxidation looks like? Well, right there it is. We've got a little leak, obviously some coolant is pouring out. This is what happens when it comes in the atmosphere. Oxidation from the aluminum and so forth. So this could have been a big problem not too far down the road.
Yeah, but that's why you got to put on your little investigator goggles, and while you're fixing certain things, keep your eyes open. Now, this could be the gasket just weeping. It could be porosity or corrosion in the actual housing. So we'll clean that up. We'll throw a new thermostat in there and make sure that that's all good to go along with our hoses. Now we got some Dayco hoses, and that's going to make sure all this stuff is nice and stout. Now the thing about a hose is you look at it and you're like, yeah, that looks round.
It looks fine.
That looks good.
Not looking from the inside.
Yeah, so they deteriorate from the inside, and usually about 100,000 miles, they're pretty stout, or about 6 years, but after that, you really got to start being concerned about the degradation. So good practice to go ahead every, 6 years, 100,000 miles, replace a lot of that stuff. Like I said, get your confidence back. So we'll continue to get some parts ordered for that and get our hoses on and get this thing buttoned up. Long gone are the days when you had to do a full tune-up at 40, 50,000 miles. Ignition systems can go up to 100,000 miles or so. So we're almost at the 200,000 point, so we're gonna go ahead and clean everything up. Now we've got coils and we've got the boots. And just like in the old days, right, you've got a coil, and this is essentially your short spark plug wire. So you want to inspect both. Now you can get kits like ours from S&P that have the coil and boot assembly together. You can get the boots separately, the coil separately. So depending on the condition and how many miles you have, but in our case, we're just going to do the whole thing. It's nice and simple. Now, the other thing we're going to do, obviously, is do the spark plugs. So we've got some iridium plugs from Denso. And if you check them out, what's nice about them is you can see that fine point in there. Now that's going to give good ignitability, but the iridium is what's going to give it that good wear property. So we're going to throw all those in, get the spark and ignition running tip-top, clean this up, and we're going to work our way to the bottom side of this car. Got that out of the way. All right. Well, as you can see, we're tearing the front end of this truck apart pretty rapidly. Now, we want to get back to that original ride quality. Now, one of the things you overlook typically is springs. You think, oh, that spring's still in there, but they do sag over time, and they won't rebound properly. And you're not going to get equal footprint on the ground all the way around the car. So we've got some new springs from Moog, properly heat treated. They're gonna make the thing ride right, evenly on the ground. And we're gonna do the shocks and struts as well. So we've got KYBs. Now these are great because they're gonna bring back that original OE quality ride and feel. But just because you throw on springs and struts, you gotta make sure all those other little pivot points are working right.
Yeah, man, and it's funny, you never notice that because you drive your car on a daily basis.
Sneaks up on
yeah, you know, it's funny. All right, let me show you what we're doing here. Ball joints are always a big part of suspension. You hate when those guys fail. Now, this is the old ball joint, and this is the new guy we have from Moog. Cool thing about that, it's got a Zert insert here, so it serves where you can lube it up and so forth, whereas the old guys just didn't. Another thing, this ball joint tool. Now, a lot of ball joints have a little socket, right? And you could just sit down. Now, you could get these ball joint servicing tools at any hardware store, any tool stop. You can borrow it from your buddy and so forth. And what I'm gonna do here, make a little racket, press this guy right out of here. It's gonna fall up into this cavity, and we'll get the new one from Moog in there, okay? That'll get that hub good and tight. Really cool, we got new hubs, man, 4 bolts, easy off, easy on. And everything's included in the little kit here, so it makes it really sweet. Now on to our new brake rotor here from Wagner. Pretty cool, we got it all cleaned up. We'll drop this guy right on, and everything you need from our guys at Wagner, including, you know, new brake lines, new fittings. We're gonna get this thing in tip-top shape, so even at 250,000, 260,000 miles, there's no issues.
Yeah, now we've got our calipers. So these are from Cardone, and what's nice is they come with all the hardware. So I'm putting the little stainless clips in here. This is what the pad is going to ride on. Now these are a full rebuild, so we don't have to worry about any of the seals, any of the slides, any of the gaskets. And to go with the Cardone calipers, you want to make sure you get a good pad. We like to do vehicle specific. So the OE spec'd out exactly what compound, what friction, everything it should be. So we've got these from Federated. These are SST. Now they're precision fit as far as the backing plate. So that's what's going to slide in the hardware and not bind up, not stick, not have premature wear, funny sounds. And you want to make sure you put the shims on. So that's going to make sure it's low NVH. You don't have the squeaks and all that stuff. So
noise, vibration.
all right, it's going to pull that hose off. I got my gaskets. We can bolt it back on, start pumping the hydraulics, and get all the air out.
Okay, now we got new brakes in all 4 corners of our girl. It's time to bleed the brakes. Now, the first thing we like to do is take a turkey baster, right? Stick down in the old reservoir, pull out all the old contaminated fluid, just pull it right in, get rid of it, and tap it off with some Mag 1.3 fluid. Now, once you got that, you're ready to bleed.
That's right, because you don't want to be flushing a whole bunch of old fluid. It just takes more time. Right. Now, speaking of time, we got a power bleeder. This is from Motive Products, and what's awesome about it's a one-man job. Yeah. So you got your fluid in here, you put a little bit of extra in here, so you got plenty. You pump this guy up to about 10, 15 PSI, and what's nice is you got about 2 quarts here in a polyethylene tank, so you got plenty of volume of fluid and air. So once you've got pressure on here, you can read your gauge. This thing just sits, then you can go around and start bleeding. So hit your far corner, work your way up. All you gotta do is crack the bleeder. Since you've got pressure and fluid, it's always flowing through. So again,
difficult, let me get it here.
Yeah, if I wasn't so lazy, I'd do it, but I'm gonna hire my man Willie here to go
warm
there.
me out, it's done, it's going now. It's bleeding clean fluid. It's really tough.
All right, so all we gotta do is finish off the last little air bubbles, make sure we got clean fluid coming out all corners. Our little Motive Products power bleeder makes this about as easy as you can get.